All right, guys, good morning. I hope you're having a lovely day. So, today I want to talk about Adolescence, the new TV show. It's on Netflix. Everybody's talking about it. I watched it. It's about 4 hours long. It's brilliant, by the way. Brilliant piece of Netflix propaganda. I thoroughly recommend you go and watch it. There will, of course, be spoilers in the video, but the spoilers don't really matter because we all know what happened. It's not a. Do you know what? I'm hesitating to call it a TV series because it's not really a TV series, is it? It's not like Game of Thrones or The Sopranos or something, or Jack Reacher or whatever. It's just, it's like four TV. It's a mini series, I suppose. But whatever you want to call it, it's not a film. It feels like a film, though. It feels like you've watched a long film once you finish watching it. And to be honest with you, I would have edited it. And I would have cut out the last hour and just had it made as like a 3-hour film. But whatever. Once you've... the point I'm trying to make is... there's no spoilers. I'm going to be talking about this in depth. I'm going to be rambling about this if you want to listen. There will be spoilers. But the spoilers don't really matter because the plot doesn't really matter. We all know what happened. A 12-year-old boy stabs a girl and gets arrested for it. And there's a scene in it where the psychologist is talking to him and he kind of flips out, gets angry. And there's a scene, following the family and the police officers as they do their investigation and so on and so forth. But the plot does not matter. It is more of a show about the emotions. That's what it's about. So anyway, if you haven't seen it, go watch it and then watch this, or watch this first and then go watch it. It doesn't really matter. But the point being, my dear friends, this is an excellent piece of Netflix propaganda. And obviously, I don't agree with the ideas that it's presenting, but nonetheless, I have to take a step back and look at it with admiration because it's very well directed, and the acting is brilliant. And the way that they very, very carefully hint and suggest, that there's this dark ideology on the computer and it's radicalizing young men, and there's some kind of there's a scene on the last show where the father of the child who stabbed this girl, he goes into a store. And he ends up meeting another young boy who's working at the store, and the guy recognizes him. They get chatting, and then this boy who's another white lad, yeah, and he's skinny, pale, right, not a very masculine creature, and he's like, oh yeah, I don't think your son did it. It's all lies, and you should crowdfund a good lawyer to get him free. And he said, we will fund it, as if. Oh, there's some dark, ominous force of young white men on the internet, and they're incels. They're part of an organization. I remember Andrew Anglin used to talk about on the Daily Stormer, a terrorist organization called incels. They're part of this community, the incel community, and they hate women, and they're talking to each other on the internet, and they hate women, and it results in violence to women and etc. etc. And it's very carefully hinted at. And it's very good. It's a very good piece of propaganda. And I've got to say, it's probably... I mean, it sounds like an overstatement, but it's probably... I can't think of anything that's had so much of an emotional impact on the people that I work with. I came into work, and one person said they watched it, and then a second, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. And they were all talking about it, and they were all kind of ramped up about it. I haven't seen anything have that kind of effect on people. And everybody watches Netflix, right? Almost everyone's got a Netflix subscription. I can't think of a single other show. I mean, people talk about June... that had something of an impact, but not really this level of excitement. People were just like, oh yeah, it's cool, because it's one of the last, the coolest movies, I suppose, that's been out in ages. people like talk about Love Island a lot, I suppose, but that's just like silly garbage in the background, isn't it? But this show, you know, I saw it pop out on Netflix this week, and I thought, oh, okay, another bit of propaganda, no big deal. Didn't really think anything of it, but then all of a sudden, boom, everyone's talking about it. It's had a really, really deep impact on people. This is going to be a talking point for a long time. This show will be iconic. It already is, I think. It's going to be iconic in the way that, I don't know, The Office is iconic, or Peep Show, or, I don't know, Faulty Towers, or whatever. You know, it's an iconic piece of British television already, and it's going to be talked about and remembered for a very, very long time. So, well done to the creators for making something which is very emotionally compelling. And I felt drawn in. I mean, if you don't know, the show is done from a essentially it's a long shot. You have 4 shows, each roughly an hour long, and each one is filmed with a single camera following the characters around. Philip Barantini, a guy from Liverpool, is the director. He previously directed Boiling Point, which is an excellent, excellent movie. Came out in 2021. Also stars Stephen Graham, the father in this show. But Boiling Point, again, it's a one-shot film. Okay, so Boiling Point's about a restaurant. The guy's the chef. He's got drug problems. He's got financial problems. He's got staff problems. He's got restaurant problems. And it films like one night of him in the restaurant and the customers there and the interactions and so on and so forth. It's really good. It's a really, really great film. I thoroughly enjoyed it when I watched it. So it's the same director that did that. And, you know, the one-shot thing, I mean, look, the one-shot thing, I first noticed it with Children of Men, which is another excellent movie. But they use it many times in that film. There's one particular scene right at the end where they've got the baby and they're trying to get to the boat, and they come out and then they get grabbed by the terrorists and they take the baby, and the guy's got to go into the building to rescue the baby, and there's explosions and bullets flying and dead bodies, and it's like a 20-minute long shot. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's fantastic. So it is a great, great, great way of capturing the attention of the audience and focusing it on the video. So that's one reason why it's very emotionally compelling. But I mean, apart from that, the acting's brilliant, and the scene with the psychologist is quite striking. And I obviously, like I say, I'm a right winger. I don't really agree with this show. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've probably already seen 10, 20, 30 other people talking about this, but this is a stupid show because it's a show which is demonizing young white kids, when it's young white kids are not the people that are stabbing people in England. It's black kids and it's Muslims, right? If you actually care about protecting young girls in England, you won't be targeting 12 or 13-year-old white kids who like to listen to Andrew Tate, right? These people are not the problem. So the show's complete bullshit. But nonetheless, the acting is incredible. I mean, the young boy, his name is Owen Cooper, English lad. He's actually 15, or maybe 16. The internet is not sure. But apparently somebody in the Evening Standard wrote his is a performance that may be the best debut ever seen by a child actor. Yeah, it really made, like, hats off to the guy. Like, this guy's got a great career ahead of him, you know. He's really made it, because this scene with him and the psychologist in the room, like, this is just a scene with two people talking, and it's like 40 minutes long or an hour long or whatever it is. But to hold the attention of the audience for that amount of time is quite astounding, really, especially when not really that much is said. Like, it's a conversation which kind of goes round in circles. It reminds me of a similar scene. There was a character played by Michael Fassbender in some old, like, this movie came out like 10 or 15 years ago. It was about the Troubles. It was about an IRA guy. His name slips my mind, but he did The Fast. He was doing he was refusing to eat. He was in prison, whatever. But there's a scene where Michael Fassbender is talking to another guy, and they're in the prison, and that scene's like 10 or 15 or minutes long, and it's just two people talking, and Michael Fassbender's like telling a story of what he did when he was young. I was always impressed by that scene. I thought that was quite striking, that it managed to capture my attention for that period of time with just dialogue. But in that scene, he was telling a deep story. In this scene, there's no story being told. It's just a back and forth between the psychologist and this little kid who's just bubbling up and boiling up with anger and losing his temper and trying to control it and going back and forth with these different emotions. It's really well done. It's really well done. So hats off to the director. Hats off to Owen Cooper, Philip Barantini, I guess the writer. Or the writers, I should say. Jack Thornton, Stephen Graham. Yeah, hats off. Good bit of propaganda. But anyway, let's talk about the politics. What is this? What is going on here with this show? First of all, as I said, this is typical Netflix diverting the blame, right? Diverting the blame away from the true culprit of the crime towards somebody else. And in this case, in England today, we have a lot of stabbings going on. A lot of people getting stabbed. It's mostly blacks that are doing this, and mostly foreigners, blacks and Muslims, young blacks and Muslims that are doing these kinds of crimes. It's not 12-year-old boys or 13-year-old boys. It's not the followers of Andrew Tate. Now, of course, we do have the infamous Elliot Rodgers lurking in the background. But that incident occurred like a decade ago and in America. And America's a different place. Everybody's wired up on big pharma drugs, mind-altering drugs from big pharma, and they've got access to firearms. And I think American people are just fundamentally different to English people. To be honest with you, I think a lot of the rhetoric that we see on the internet, in the manosphere, in regard to relationships, dating relationships between men and women and so on and so forth, coming out of America, probably doesn't actually really reflect the way people date here in England. I just don't think we're the same as them. I think people in America are much angrier for various reasons. It's always been known that Americans are more loudmouthed, more emotional than English people. They're more brash, and of course now we have the introduction of circumcision in America. So something like 80% or whatever of men in America are circumcised. If you don't have a foreskin, you're going to be angry. Okay, people that don't have foreskins are generally angry. This is why Muslims are angry. So you're going to have sexual problems, right? Nobody wants to talk about it because I guess Americans don't want to talk about it, but it gives you sexual dysfunction. I'm sorry. You can't have sex properly if you don't have a foreskin. It's just not possible. This is why James Bond is the world's #1 sex symbol, okay? Because he's English and he's got a foreskin. But I think that a lot of the dysfunction in the dating market, a lot of that is just American problems that's getting projected onto English life. Of course, we do have similar problems here, but I don't think it's as bad. But nonetheless, Elliot Rodgers, the infamous hater of women and killer of women, first of all American, second of all half Asian, so he's actually a half caste. But he's kind of like the exception that proves the rule. Like most, okay, so the one crazy half white guy killed a woman or a bunch of women and wrote a manifesto about it a decade ago. But it's, in general, it's not the thing that happens with the incel community. Generally speaking, it's blacks. It's violent black people that are killing and stabbing women. So this show is typical diversion away from the real problem. People have been saying that the show is... People are saying the show is a remake of the murder of a girl called Eliane Adam. Is a black girl who was stabbed to death by Hassan Sentamu in 2023. 17-year-old killer. First of all, 17. It's a big difference between a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old. But also, obviously, yeah, black. Hassan, Muslim. Black Muslim stabs a black girl. Okay? So they're saying it's a remake of that. It's also, to be fair to the show, they say it's a remake of the murder of Ava White, who was stabbed in Liverpool. She was stabbed over a row of a Snapchat video. And she was stabbed by a 14-year-old. She was 12, stabbed by a 14-year-old. And we don't know who the 14-year-old is, but that happened in Liverpool, and obviously the show is set in Liverpool, so maybe it's more to do with that. But whatever. I mean, the point is, the blacks are doing all the stabbing, and Netflix wants you to think that it's white kids that are the problem. Okay, white kids on the internet radicalized by Islam, or radicalized, by Andrew Tate. Well, I guess he is a Muslim, isn't he, Andrew Tate? So I mean, how do you square that circle? How do they square that circle in their mind, right? But anyway, so that's what they're trying to say. They're also ignoring the fact that, apart from the racial and religious elements of violent men stabbing women, there's the marijuana problem. Okay, I know this is a joke on the internet that every time there's a terrorist attack, Peter Hitchens will come out and blame it on marijuana instead of on race or Islam. But nonetheless, it's true. If you smoke a lot of weed, you can end up doing violent things. So this is not portrayed in the show at all. And then, of course, you have the fact that a lot of violent crime and a lot of people that end up in prison come from single parents' families. They're raised by single mothers, and so they've got all kinds of mental and emotional problems because of this. But the show is made, and of course, also in addition to that, the kind of people that go out and do these kinds of acts of violence are usually quite stupid. Let's be honest with you. Prison is full of low IQ people. Why are they in prison? Because they don't have impulse control. Why don't they have impulse control? Because they've got a low IQ. There's a correlation between lack of control and lack of IQ, because obviously the frontal cortex of your brain, this is where your intelligence resides, but it's also where your ability to restrain yourself resides. So dumb people don't have much control, essentially. Smart people do, and it makes common sense. If you're intelligent, you can think about the consequences of your actions. If you're intelligent, you can think about stuff. You can spend the day sitting down and thinking about stuff, and you can entertain yourself in that way instead of needing sense gratification. So smart people are usually less violent. Now, of course, sometimes you get the high IQ killer who's a perverted. I remember Milo talking about this years ago, saying that for whatever reason, there's a lot of smart homosexuals, which just makes you wonder, it's like a high IQ thing, and then for some reason that high IQ gets perverted, and then it turns into something more sinister. So that can happen. That's probably the case with Elliot Rodgers, who obviously wrote like a 130-page long manifesto about why he hates women. This is a guy who put a lot of thought in it. He was thought into his actions. He wasn't just lashing out violently. So, yeah, but it's the exception that proves the rule. Okay, most of the stabbing and killing of women is coming from blacks. It's coming from Muslims. It's coming from people that smoke marijuana. It's coming from single parent families, and it's coming from low IQ people. Right? Possibly even there's a poverty aspect as well there. The film makes it very, very clear that the boy is white, and he's got a mum and dad. The mum and dad, they're just normal. They're not super rich, but the dad works. He's got a business. He's got a house. Okay, they've got money, and he's smart, right? The show makes it very, very clear. Oh, you're a smart kid, they say. Right? Right when they arrest him and they're interviewing him and so on and so forth, oh, you're a smart kid. You get it. You understand. You're on the ball, right? They make it very, very, very clear. He's a smart, young, white kid. Okay? These people are the problem now, apparently. And why is that? It's because the establishment is afraid of smart, young, white kids. Especially smart, young, white kids that are spending time on the internet. Because a smart, young, white kid that is on the internet will gravitate towards Andrew Tate. And he will gravitate towards 4chan. And he will be radicalized by right-wing politics. And by the memes. And by Twitter. And etc., etc., etc. It's the dumb kids. Dumb kids are not going to get radicalized. It's going to be harder. Because they'll just be like watching the football. Or doing whatever else it is. Ordinary kids are probably listening to drill or something. Whatever. Smart kids are dangerous though. And the show makes it very, very crystal clear that this is the problem. Smart young white kids in their rooms alone on the computer, learning about the world, right? Looking at memes, etc., etc. So what's the show all about? The show is all about, first of all, redirect the anger towards the white kid, but it's also basically it's a move to take away our digital freedoms, and they're trying to get a law passed through Parliament right now called sorry, that's my mistake. They've already passed the law. It's called the Online. What's it called? It's called the Online Safety Act of 2023. Passed last year, and in October last year, and it's going to start being implemented soon. But essentially they empower Ofcom. Ofcom, of course, is the organization which regulates the internet, telecommunications, postal service, etc., etc. Created in 2003. So Tony Blair gave us Ofcom to control freedom of speech on the internet. It's actually this is really funny. That's really hilarious. I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now. Go to the Wikipedia and check out the Ofcom building. It's on the side of the Thames. It reminds me immediately of the building in the James Bond movie. Which one is it? It would have been Spectre, I think. In which there's the new MI6 boss, and he's trying to get the Five Eyes together. He's trying to create this new security council to monitor everybody, and the architecture of this building looks exactly like the one in the James Bond movie. So that's kind of hilarious. I never noticed that before. But anyway, Tony Blair repressing freedom of speech. The Online Safety Act has gone through last year. More repression. It says here enforcement. You can you can block internet providers, you can block search engines, you can block this, that, and the other. And I've heard people saying that they're going to shut down 4chan soon. Hasn't happened yet. We'll just have to see. There's also another act which was a private members bill, which they're trying to get through Parliament, and the idea was to raise the legal age to join a social media app from 13 to 16. So they're trying to get that pushed through. So this is the goal. Okay. Well, there are many goals. Whenever there's a piece of propaganda, there are always many goals. The first goal: deflect the blame away from Muslims and brown people. So now, because everybody knows England's becoming violent, there's a big stabbing problem. Okay. So deflect the blame away from the brown people onto young white men. Okay, they are the problem. You got to put that into people's heads. Young white men are the dangerous people that are stabbing, going around stabbing. I actually had a girl say to me once, young white girl in her 20s. She said she's always been slightly afraid of men because they're volatile. And she wasn't talking about brown men. She was talking about white men. I'm just thinking to myself, like, you know, white men are not really that dangerous, love. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know, go and live in London for a while, and maybe then you'll grow to understand. But that's the first goal. The second goal, of course, more internet censorship. That's what it's all about. Okay, the creators of this show, as we've seen, they've been all over the TV this week, and they're going to Parliament, and we've seen Keir Starmer come out and say that they're going to put this thing, like they're going to play it in schools. Like it's literally Netflix propaganda being promoted in our schools. It's amazing. I mean, by the way, like I'm not even 100% against movies being played in schools if it's a good movie. If Netflix came out and they did a great movie about Alfred the Great defeating the Great Heathen Army or something, some really good historical film, I wouldn't be 100% against them playing it in schools and so on and so forth. But I mean, that's just the problem with education in general, though, isn't it? The real solution to the education problem is you need to get the state out of education. You need to shut down the education system. We need, what is it, 100 billion a year we spend on education, roughly. Well, let's have a tax cut. Let's have 100 billion tax cut. Shut down all the schools. Shut down all the funding for this propaganda machine, and let the children, let their minds flourish. Okay, let parents educate children. But I mean, this is really actually, in many ways, this kind of strikes at the heart of what is going on here, because the whole question of radicalization and freedom of speech, it all kind of, in a way, boils down to capturing the minds of the young people. Who is in control of the minds of the young people? Like at the end of the show, we have the scene with the mother and the father. Obviously, the son, he's in prison now. They're not happy, right? Because people in the town, they hate them, and everybody's giving them a hard time, and so on and so forth. Obviously, it must be very traumatic. By the way, like if I had a son that stabbed a girl, I'd disown him. And it's interesting that they don't. And it's interesting that the show gives us the conclusion that they've got to forgive the son and talk to. It's this therapy bollocks. No, you need punishment. In fact, like the real solution, if you're worried about men stabbing girls, whether it's 12-year-old boys or whether it's black kids or whatever, the real solution is the death penalty. Let's bring that back. That'll be a good deterrent, right? Does the show promote that? No, they just promote more brainwashing. This is the left wing. This is how they think. They don't want punishment. They don't want punishment. They want therapy. They want to understand. I mean, the whole show does the third segment of the show is an hour-long conversation between a psychologist and a child. She's trying to understand. I wouldn't try to understand the kid. I don't know what, I can't say it on the internet, but the kid deserves to be executed. Like, dude, you stabbed a girl to death. That's it, buddy. I don't care if you're unhappy, right? I don't care if it was a mistake and you feel bad about it. I don't care if you're only 12 years old. You're going to get hung, right? You're old enough to kill somebody, then you're old enough to be executed, in my opinion. And that's the real solution to this. And that would be the solution to so much crime in this country. But people in this country, they know they can kill and get away with it. Axel Rudicaban is getting away with it. He was smiling in court. They're making memes about him. Like, black people are sharing memes, like really weird, dark TikTok videos with dark, creepy music with his face. He's a hero to some people for stabbing young white children. He's a hero. And part of the reason why he's a hero is because he got away with it. And Keir Starmer stepped in and said he's going to be out in 18 years' time. I mean, imagine like the mentality of this person. Like he's a true believer. You got to give Keir Starmer that. He's a true believer. In another age, he would have been an excellent priest, right? He would have really been a real Bible thumping priest. Unfortunately, we have him ruling over our country in this age. But nonetheless, on a tangent, like the real conclusion everybody should be drawing from this is death penalty. And I don't know why people don't jump to this conclusion. And by the way, this is something I talked about after the Axel Rudabcabana case. Obviously, after this case, a lot of people jumped on the right, on the internet right, jumped to the conclusion of, oh, immigration, we have to stop immigration. And it's like, yeah, okay, I mean, I agree. Immigration's a problem. Islamic radicalization is a problem. Yeah, I agree. But in the here and now, the real solution is death penalty. And you don't see... I mean, you saw a bit of it after he got sentenced. There was a bit of, conversation about bring back the death penalty, but you don't see a horde of angry Englishmen saying, like, hang these people. And the reaction to this show, you don't see a horde, even on the right. Like, the real conclusion of this show is, oh, you killed someone, you stabbed someone to death, I don't care why you did it, right? I don't care if you were radicalized by the internet or whatever. Bish, bash, bosh, you're dead, problem solved. Execution. Punishment. You have to punish bad people. Somebody on the right, if you're on the right, you believe in punishment. If you're on the left, you believe in therapy and understanding for some reason. Well, sometimes you can't really understand bad people. Sometimes bad people are just bad. Sometimes, like, I don't really care why you did it. You just got to hang, I mean, you can... A little bit of understanding is okay, but too much understanding and you're just weak, So that should have been the conclusion. But anyway, before I got into that tangent, what was the point I was making? Oh, yes. I mean, the real heart of the matter is, how do we educate our children? How do we educate them? And who's in charge of that? Now, the state obviously is in charge of that, and they want to propagandize and brainwash young men into being feminists, and this is what this is all about. They want to get the young people off of the social media. They want to get them off the internet. They want to shut down the internet to stop young men getting radicalized. That's what the show's all about. But the point I'm trying to make is, on a deeper level, if you want a real traditional conservative right-wing society, then parents should be in control of the education of their children. This is one of the major themes in this show. The mother and the father in the last scene, they're crying, and they're trying to ask questions like, how did we lose him? How did we lose this kid? We thought we were good parents. He was just alone in his room, and we tried to do the right thing. We tried to raise him properly, but all this has happened. We didn't know what he was looking at on the computer. Okay, well, and they're saying, like, well, we should have talked to him more. We should have, and yeah, this is a big problem actually. You should have talked to your kid more, but it's hard for parents to raise their kids properly when they have to send their children to these schools where they just get bullied. I mean, in the second scene, the depiction of the school is just horrific. Can you imagine going to a school like that? Just out of control kids, out of control classroom, people shouting, people screaming, nobody's following the orders of the teachers, violence, bullying, nastiness. It's a pit. It's a prison. It's awful. Interestingly enough, I mean, this is the thing about, like, any piece of good propaganda or any good lie. There's always little elements of truth. There's all little drops of truth in what they're saying, and this is how the left. This is how they win. You give something true, and then you wrap a lie around it. But the little elements, the little drop of truth that's given in the show, it's like the sugar that helps the medicine go down. Right, so one of the police officers, she's in the school, and she's talking about, she says, "Oh, kids, they just need one thing. They need to be good at one thing so they can be happy about themselves." And it's very true, actually. That is absolutely, in my opinion, what a kid needs. They need to know that they're good at something, so they know where they fit in the world. I mean, if you're a young teenager and you don't have any skills, You don't have a strong hobby. You don't have a dream. You don't have a desire. You're not good at anything. You're just like floating around the place, being ordered to go to school and being ordered to do this or that and the other, and that you don't have any passion that you can put your energy into, then yeah, you're going to go off the rails, aren't you? You're going to be really unhappy. So there are some little red pills in the show, but the point I'm trying to get at here, my dear friends, is that, in conclusion, watching this show, first of all, death penalty. You murder someone, you're dead. Hang them from the lamppost. Okay, this should be happening up and down the country. Public execution, not private, public. That will make people understand, because there are bad people out there, and they're only scared of violence. They're not scared of anything else. And secondly, we need a total transformation of the education system. We've got to tear this thing down. It's a brainwashing machine. And we've got to go back to private education. I mean, this would just solve everything, to be honest with you. It would solve all of our problems, because it all boils down to education at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, when it comes to the nature-nurture argument, I'm on the side of nature, not nurture. But when it comes to white people, they are of the same nature. And so now we have to ask the question of, well, how do you nurture them? How do you educate them? And if you get that right, you'll have a healthy civilization. And if you mess that up, then you're going to have a terrible country. So we really have to get that right. And I think that state education has been a complete failure. It's just a brainwashing machine. It's just designed to make you conform. It breaks down the relationship between father and son, parents and their children. It disconnects and disassociates the parents away from the education of their children, so that they have no say in it. So they don't know what's being taught to their kids at school, and they almost in some ways feel like they have no right to intervene. And they don't. You don't see parents. This is the thing. Like, you don't. Your father should be your teacher. That's what he should be. If you're a young boy, you should look at your father as the man who is explaining the world to you. All right. Now, maybe, obviously, the father's got to work, so he'll send the boy off to a teacher. Like, ideally, if we had private education, you send the boy off to a teacher, or you send the boy off to a private school or whatever. Okay. But the boy should be looking up at the father as his teacher, and fathers should play a role in telling their kids things about history, about politics, about the world, about how it works. Now, I don't see that happening. Of course, I'm not a father myself, but I mean, my father, who was a boomer, never told me any of this stuff. He never really sat down and talked to me and said, "Oh, this is this and this is that," and how is the boomers just had a very hands-off approach to education. I can't say what previous generations were like, but it does remind me that, I mean, one thing I've been thinking a lot is the massive influence that Kurt Cobain and grunge has had on our society. But I do feel like the whole grunge movement was like peak Gen X, and it was peak kind of rejection of boomer culture. And one of the greatest things that Kurt Cobain said was, I can't remember the lyric exactly, but something, I always wanted a father, but all I had was a dad, right? So the boomers, they just wanted to be dads. They didn't want to be fathers. They wanted, oh, I'll be your friend, son. It's like, well, your son doesn't really need a friend. Your son needs a father who's going to tell him the way the world works, and who's going to guide him, and he's going to raise him up to be a man. But I don't think most fathers, they don't really seem to do this anymore. They don't want to discipline. They're not allowed to discipline, because you're not allowed to hit your kids. You obviously should be able to hit your kids, okay, and your wife, by the way. And obviously, I'm not in favor of beating up your wife, but unless the man is able to, like, I mean, the thing about corporal punishment, it has to be there as a threat. It's not that you should use it, but it should be there in the background, that you know, like, if you just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, you're going to get a slap, right? That's its function. It's kind of like the nuclear deterrent. You don't actually want to drop the atom bomb, but you got to have a nuke so that people leave you alone, right? But fathers aren't allowed to properly discipline their children anymore. They're not able to discipline their wives anymore, so they're emasculated. But they don't discipline their children. They don't educate their children either. They don't. I mean, from what I've seen, they don't teach their son. They don't tell them what to do. They don't guide them. They try to be friends with their son, and then they always get like fascinated and bewildered as to why they've lost this friendship with their son. Well, maybe you lost your friendship with your son in his teenage years because in those years your son doesn't need a friend. He needs a father. He needs more guidance. Doesn't just need someone that's going to go, oh yeah, you're right, mate. You're right. How was school today? Oh, good. Great. Yeah, do you want to watch the football later or whatever? Like this kid's father was a plumber. Well, you should have taught him how to do some plumbing. And then at the age of 16, he'd have a profession. Boom, he comes out of school, got a job, knows how to make money because his father raised him in a serious way. So education, sending your kids to school completely destroys all of this. It destroys the father-son bond. Okay, because a good father should raise his son to be like him. And you can say, well, maybe the boy doesn't want to be a plumber. And it's like, well, if later on in his life he chooses a different path, when he's grown up, that's fine. But when he's a child, you have an opportunity here to turn that child into something. You have an opportunity to educate that child, give him a skill, give him an ability, so that when he is 16, 17, 18, he knows how to make money, he knows where he fits in the world. Okay, instead we've got this weird system where you get sent to school, you're given this broad education, you learn a bunch of stuff which you're probably never going to use again for the rest of your life, and then you get to 16, 17, 18, you've got a crisis, you don't know what you're doing with your life, so you just either go to university or you get some crappy minimum wage job and then you try and figure things out. Like, it's an awful system. Children are such an opportunity. They're such a golden opportunity. Like, you can, man, like, if you just specialize with child education, then you could have 18-year-olds everywhere who are very, very good at whatever it is they do, whether it's music or whether it's being an engineer or whether it's being a plumber or whether it's being some kind of craftsman or whether it's running a business or whatever. I mean, you take a kid at 10 and you just start training them, then after 8 years, they can do the job really well and they can stand on their own 2 feet. So this is how it should work. And I think this is how it has always worked in all traditional societies. If your dad's a baker, you become a baker. If your father's a farmer, you become a farmer, and etc., etc. And if you have that kind of thing, then you have a strong father-son relationship. Because the father will see the son as being useful as well. And this is another thing about men. Like, if you're men just work, okay? Maybe just women don't understand this. Women like to talk to each other and like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Men, sometimes we like to talk. Most of the time we just like to work and then be left alone. Right? We work and then we relax, Men are quite functional in this regard. This is why a lot of men end up being very lonely, because men just kind of like, they have goals and they achieve those goals and they kind of concentrate on that. Oh, I've got to go to work, I've got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, boom, 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 boom. Okay, done all that, right, I'll sit on the sofa. They don't like think, oh, I have to phone up that friend who I haven't talked to in a month and ask her, like, oh, how are you? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Like, it just doesn't really pass through a man's brain. They just don't think in those terms. So men, which is why men end up being lonely a lot of the time, unfortunately. But if your child is not useful to you as a man, then how are you supposed to communicate with him, and what kind of relationship are you supposed to have with him? Whereas if he is useful, if you can work with him together on a project and you're helping each other, then you're friends now. because you're building something together, you're doing something together. I mean, this has been a new thing, by the way, and they've got these man sheds popping up all around the country, like men going to, like, because they've been trying to give therapy to men for years, and it's never really worked. But now they've got this new shed thing, and you go there, and you like do some engineering or something like this. You fix stuff or something, and then while you're fixing the stuff, you talk. This works really well for men. That's how men talk to each other. You work on a project together, and while you're working on it, you chat. So that's what young boys need. They need a father figure who's going to do that, essentially. And then you'll fix family life. You'll fix all of these problems. You won't have angry men going off the rails and stabbing people. Not that that is a problem. I don't think Andrew Tate's radicalizing anybody to stab people. But the real solution is tear down the education system. Go back to the old days, the old way of doing things, where fathers would just educate their children themselves. You can send your kid to like Sunday school or whatever. He can learn to read and write. I don't know how much education a child needs. I've got to be honest with you. Most people I talk to don't seem to know anything about anything anyway. They're just going to learn their worldview from watching the TV anyway. But if you teach the kid how to read, he'll read and he'll educate himself. It takes a lifetime to learn. Right? So, you know, for elites and things like this, okay, send them to a university and send them to send them to Eton or whatever so they can learn how to run the country. But your average working class guy who's going to end up working in Tesco's or whatever, he needs to learn a skill, and that's what's going to make him happy, and that's what's going to make him feel fulfilled. So the show kind of reveals a lot of this. Like I say, like I don't want to just chuck this in the dump. Like, I don't think right-wing people on the internet should just totally dismiss this thing offhand and just say, oh, it's just left-wing propaganda. It is left-wing propaganda, and it is bullshit and nonsense for all the reasons I just described. But nonetheless, some interesting questions are raised. And in regard to the censorship, do I think that we should ban children from social media? Like, I don't know, guys. Like, I'm kind of a free speech guy. Like, I don't really believe in censorship for anything. I got to be honest with you. Should we stop children from viewing the horrors of this world? I mean, in the old days, they used to hang people in public, and the kids could watch. They'd see. It wouldn't be hidden from them. They'd know about the violence. Children love violence, by the way. I mean, they love, like, you look at fairy tales, you look at Brothers Grimm and all of the European fairy tales. It's all, you know, Little Red Riding Hood. It's all like monsters eating people and ghost stories and stuff like this. Children are not really that terrified of violence. I think perhaps part of the problem we have is this naive... we're naively trying to shelter children from the horrors of the world. No, perhaps children should see the horrors of the world. Why not? Children should know about what's going on and how bad things are. Will it really damage them? I'm just not sure, to be honest with you. I'm not sure. I mean, I remember as a child, like, seeing Freddy Krueger, right, Nightmare on Elm Street, and there's this horrible scene where, like some girl gets thrown into a furnace and she's being burned alive, and it's awful. And it was quite, like, shocking to watch. But once you've seen that kind of thing a few times, you become desensitized to it, and it's not a problem anymore. So, should children not be allowed to see that stuff? I don't know. Should children be allowed to see... I mean, I just don't know. And I practically speaking, I don't see... The only way to enforce that is more censorship on the internet and more shutting down of freedom of speech. And it's impractical. And the only way that you can do it is through some giant government authority banning stuff and through implementing some kind of censorship. And I don't really believe in any of that. So, I guess in conclusion, Yes, there's a lot of bullying that goes on social media. Yes, there's a conversation to be had about emojis and all of this stuff. But a lot of this stuff is just happening because kids are getting crammed into these schools and they don't want to be there. And their parents, and they're not disciplined in these schools because their parents can't take them out of the schools. Now, if you had private education and people were paying, somebody was paying a teacher to teach their kid, if there was bullying in the school or bad, this kind of bad nonsense, then the parent would just take the child out of the school and they'd pay a different teacher to teach their kid. So you'd end up with more of a professional education without all the nonsense and the bullying and the bullshit. So I just don't think is social media to blame, because there is a lot of bullying and nastiness that goes on social media. Is social media to blame, or is the education system itself to blame? I'm just really not sure, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously social media is addictive and the apps are designed to be addictive and so on and so forth, but are they the problem, or is the problem that just kids, they have a bad education and they've got nothing to do? They can't go outside and play because the parents don't let them out in the street, right? Because they're afraid they're going to get stabbed or kidnapped or something. Is the problem they just have bad relationships with their parents as they grow up with a warped idea of what it is to be an adult? I mean, the kids should just be able to say, oh, look, so-and-so said this or that on social media, and they should be able to ask their parents about it, and they could clear the whole subject matter up. But instead, kids, they hide themselves away from their parents. So I just think, there's a problem with the internet and bullying on the internet and social media and so on and so forth. But censoring everything, I would argue, would be the last solution. There are so many more solutions to this problem before we talk about, taking mobile phones away from children. Because there's just, the mobile phones are here and they're here to stay. They're not going to go away. And your child will use that mobile phone to look at pornography and to look at gore and to look at radical content. And that's just the way it is. And what adults really have to do is just man up and answer questions. Answer difficult questions about gore and radical content, and answer the difficult questions about whatever it is Andrew Tate is saying. That's what they got to do. This whole show is just advocating hiding stuff away. Censorship. Hide these problems away. Hide these questions away. Don't talk to your kids. Just keep them docile and stupid and compartmentalized, and turn off their internet and just try and distract them back to the television, or just that's all it is. That's all that's going on. And I just don't think that's the way to raise children. And what else? I mean, in regards to Andrew Tate, like I've been checking Twitter to see if he's had a reaction to this. I mean, he's in this famous show, and he hasn't even bothered saying anything about it. It's quite funny. He's off in America now, by the way. Forget about Bruv. Remember that? He started a political party called Bruv. Seems to have forgotten about that. Now he's just hanging out in America. What do I think of Andrew Tate? God almighty. Like, I mean, first of all, the guy's a con artist. He ripped off a bunch of men. They wanted to find a wife, and they thought they were talking to a girl, but they weren't. They're talking to Andrew Tate, and they give tens of thousands of pounds or whatever to some girl in Romania they think is going to be their wife. And, Andrew Tate just stole their money. That's how he made his money. He bragged about it on the internet. So he's a guy that makes money out of ripping off lonely young men. That's always been his scam. First of all, he used cam girls to do it, and now he just uses his persona to do it. Apply to my Hustlers University or whatever. That's always been his scam. That's always been his thing. So I'm not really a fan of him. I'm not a fan of the Playboy lifestyle. I'm not a fan of the bling. But all that being said, I mean, he's a better role model than than anything else that's out there. Young boys need role models. And if you're not going to give them, if Hollywood's not going to give them an action hero to follow, right? Like when I was a kid, I looked up to Luke Skywalker. I thought he was brilliant. But kids don't have anything like that to look up to now. All of the heroes are totally feminized and weak. So who are they going to turn to? They're going to turn to Andrew Tate. I mean, that's just the way it is. Like, why wouldn't you if you're a young teenager? Like, look at him. He's got his sports car and his cigar, and he's getting laid. He's making money. I mean, it's all very fake and shallow and what have you, but nonetheless, it is a form of masculinity. So it's difficult to hate him. He's just a very deeply flawed person. I mean, he's probably a Freemason. He's always doing that symbol with his hands, isn't he? And yeah, he's not a great role model for kids. You need good role models for kids. I mean, I've been saying for a long time, this whole manosphere needs to get wrecked and pushed aside, and you need masculine fathers to step in. You need men who are married, they've got children, they're successful. They should be the role models for young men, young boys to look up to aspire to, and to try to emulate. Instead of, I mean, Tate is married, but he doesn't act like he's married. That's the problem. So instead of emulating and looking up to players, men should be looking up to, I don't know, maybe some of the football players are married and they've got kids. They could look up to them. I don't know. I'm not into football, But the whole Playboy lifestyle is just leading people in the wrong direction. Although, I mean, let's be honest. Like, can you really blame guys? Because girls just love players. They pretend that they don't, but they do. They do. They love it. If you chat to any Brazilian girl, right, and you get intimate with a Brazilian girl, what will she say to you? She'll call you a safado. She'll be like, oh, safado. Was he a safado, cara? What does safado mean? It means playboy. That's what they'll call you, right? If you get intimate with them, right? Oh, you're such a player. You're such a bad boy, right? That's what they say when they like you. And English girls are no different. All women are like this. They like playboys. They want to have sex with the guy that's having sex with all the other girls. That's what they want. Oh, all the girls like that guy. Oh, I like him too. I mean, this is how retarded women are. They don't like good guys. They pretend that they do, but they just don't. So, men come to understand this, right? You can learn it the easy way, you can learn it the hard way. You can, and most of us, I guess, we have to learn it the hard way. We try and be nice to women, and then they don't like us, and you be mean to women, and all of a sudden they like you. Right? Keep them mean, keep them keen. These are just the rules. So, yeah, you need, I don't know, man, married players to be role models for men, or something like this. But whatever the case, I mean, there you go. I thought I'd do a hour-long ramble on this show. So that's my opinion on adolescence. Boys are being betrayed. Boys need a better education. Let's scrap the entire education system. Give us all a tax cut. We need better relationships between fathers and sons. And this is just a ploy for the government to distract people away from black crime and Muslim crime, and to blame the white man, blame the young white kid. It's just typical bullshit. But it's really well directed. It's a really great show, and it's amazing to watch. Like, I've been talking to some people, and they just swallowed this bullshit whole. Like, you can never forget how many stupid people there are out there who just, they watch a Netflix show and they think it's real. I mean, Keir Starmer himself called this thing a documentary when he was talking about it in Parliament. He called it a documentary. Like, it reminds me actually of a conversation I had with a Jew, like a decade ago. And I was just talking about race realism and this and that and the other, and he turns around, he says to me, oh yeah, but 12 years a slave, and look how badly they treated the slaves in that movie, right? I just said, mate, that's a movie. It's not real. It's a film. Why are you quoting a film to me as if it's reality? Like it's... And he's like, oh, but it's so graphic. It's like, it's a film. It's not real. But there are people out there who are really, really dumb, and they just... they don't get it. They don't understand that the government's lying to them. I don't know, man. I mean, at the bottom of this, there's just a fundamental cowardice, I suppose. Like, people... Like, it's very, very uncomfortable. It's very disturbing and uncomfortable to think that your government is lying to you. It's very disturbing and uncomfortable to think that the people in power and the politicians and the media companies and so on and so forth are lying to you and they're against you. And most people don't want to swallow... Most people don't want to think about it, and they don't want to swallow that pill, and so they end up getting brainwashed by this shit. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch the like genuine emotional reaction that a lot of people have had to this show. And it really does play on you know, your average middle class, or not even middle class, but your average white family. They care about their kids. And they're going to watch this and they're going to be like, oh, my son or my younger brother, what are you looking at on the internet? And they're going to be really... They're going to try and do something about this out of concern and out of love. And in the meantime, they're going to be completely ignoring the black kids that are running around outside with their knives. But there you go. That's the world we live in. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.